Hello Star Wars enthusiasts, and welcome to my series X Autistic Moments Explained. Respectfully, I went into making this series with the idea that I'd just make a highlight reel of Tech's most cherished autistic moments, but after showing a rough draft to an actually autistic person, they asked for my receipts. How did I know this was an autistic moment, and what evidence did I have to back that up? So I couldn't just ignore that! So behold my now exhaustive analysis of Tech's autistic nature, categorized by observed and studied characteristics in no particular order. Yes, I cite my sources. No, this isn't just WebMD symptoms of autism. I really wanted to get into the meat of what truly makes a person autistic. How does their brain function differently, and how can we see these functionalities manifest in Tech? To inform or not to inform? That is the question. It's incredible the amount of information that can be housed in the autistic brain, but what is more difficult for them is finding out which piece of information goes where in the flow of a conversation. This can result in a flow of information that is thorough, but perhaps not the most concise or relevant. I've seen it referred to as context blindness. More specifically, contextual blindness is defined as a reduced spontaneous use of context when giving meaning to a stimulus. That is, when someone has context blindness, they have trouble making sense of details appropriate to their situation.
Technically they were trying to mate with us. And for your information, the stinger of a Yalbek queen is a delicacy on some planets. They call him Tech.
Everything that Tech says is correct, but it just might not belong in the context.
These chambers are quite the engineering marvel. This blast primer coating is capable of withstanding.
And on the flip side of things, Tech may have information that is relevant, but his ability, or lack thereof, to read the context of the situation robs his brain of the catalyst it needs to trigger a retrieval of information.
I confirmed my suspicions after analyzing her DNA while we were in the infirmary.
And you waited until now to mention it?
Well, I thought it was obvious.
How is it obvious?
Tech, you said the regs were programmed, but you never mentioned the chip. How else did you think it worked? The creature is most likely an Ordo moon dragon, a species that feeds on raw energy. It was probably drawn to the capacitor's electric charge.
That would have been good to know beforehand, Tech.
I imagine that since Tech has a history of missing opportunities to provide crucial intel, he often overcompensates when he is asked to supply information by not leaving out any portion of his thought process, as it may actually contain the answers the asker was looking for. To illustrate this, let's play a game. How long does it take for Tech to get to the point?
There. Those pipes are reactor conduits. And, well, they should lead to the main reactor's external exhaust port. That is our path to the outside.
How's the chip scanner coming? Since Rex's chip was removed, I am able to establish a baseline by comparing his brain scan to ours, allowing for the detection of any cellular anomaly.
He means it's almost finished. Are you okay?
My left femur has been fractured by approximately 150 kilograms of pressure. So, no.
I've got it. Why didn't I think of it before? This is not a prison.
Yeah, I beg to differ.
This is a Kaminoan facility. It was built prior to the Clone Wars. There were no barracks or prisons when it was constructed. Well, how does that help us? Because while these cells were retrofitted to hold normal individuals, they could not possibly account for someone like Wrecker.
This is a Class 4 freighter, isn't it?
Yes, why?
Containers on Class 4 freighters are equipped with re-entry thrusters. We can escape in a cargo container.
You are correct. I am impressed.
Tech doesn't have a firm grasp on what information is a priority, and as a result, he may choose to give less crucial information first.
Hunter, the creature is the same species that attacked Coruscant during the war. You must not let it get near the power grid, or it will increase exponentially in size. We are using an alternate mode of transport. My calculations have us crashing towards the upper forest region of the planet.
Crashing?
Tech's info dumping is a manifestation of this context blindness. He doesn't know when the context calls for an extremely detailed briefing, and so he just puts it out there just in case.
This is not ideal.
I'm very convinced that this is what makes the Bad Batch so unique. Since Tech doesn't have any reason to throw possibilities out the window from the contextual perspective, he has a lot of options for the Batch to try.
There is one covert infiltration point. From there.
In this scene, for instance, very few individuals would even consider the smokestack as an infiltration point. It's designed to eject toxic hot air out of the refinery, but Tech isn't bothered by all the background noise of context. It's a hole, a way inside, and the function of the stack is irrelevant because for 60 seconds, it's a clear passage. Tech's context blindness is rarely an actual issue as he performs his function in the Batch, but once he is taken out of that very specific context, we see that although Tech is always correct, his text position may not be received by people who are as understanding as, say, Hunter or me, because I love and appreciate all his info dumps.
Obviously, we are different. They manipulated pre-existing aberrations in our DNA, resulting in your brute strength, Crosshair's sharpshooting skills, Hunter's enhanced senses, and my exceptional mind.
Remember, context doesn't just involve understanding setting, but also the people in that setting. Tech's difficulty in making his answers short and to the point is made all the more obvious when he interacts with Wrecker.
The signature key should be embedded below the rear parallax inverters.
Just tell me what to rip out. Clones being programmed. Nothing controls me.
Wrecker, it is a logical conclusion that your affinity for destruction would stem from your conditioning.
You take that back.
I am merely stating a scientific hypothesis based on factual data.
How long's it been?
180 rotations in a standard cycle, but galactic zone changes put the adjusted figure at around 205.
What?
A long time.
Sometimes autistic people are labeled as know-it-alls or cause irritation because they wantonly correct people who did not ask for correction, but this is just a manifestation of their context blindness.
Well, we did steal from them.
Technically, the Rokai stole the lizard first. We are merely intercepting it.
I don't see it that way. He wants to cut open my head.
All of our heads, actually.
Tech's info dumping is particularly unrestrained because he's living the autistic dream of having an occupation that relies heavily on him not holding back on what comes so naturally to him. His job is to provide the team with all the facts about their situation, so a lot of the times his actuallys are actually quite helpful.
Ha! We're all you need.
Actually, if my intel is correct, the General will not need any of us. The Clone War may soon be over.
You're Saw Gerrera, trained by Captain Rex and General Skywalker to fight for the Republic.
Rex, what do we know about this place?
All we know is they're very primitive. My intel says the Poltecs worship flying reptiles.
What the heck was that?
It's one of those reptiles.
But put Tech in a context where he has to guess when to offer info, and you get mixed results.
Fraxis. That is the former center of the Separatist government. It has since become an Imperial outpost.
I'm not interested in a history lesson, Goggles. I never had clone deserters come to me before.
Yes, well, we separated due to a fundamental difference in ideology.
That's cute, you thinking I care.
Sid sees Tech's offerings of unsolicited information as a way to subvert her authority, but he honestly just thinks that any time is a good time to be informed or corrected.
I assume you boys know what a tactical droid is? They were the
operational brains of the Separatist military.
This is my briefing, Goggles.
However, we do see that Tech is able to adapt to Sid.
That is Castle Sereno, the former home of Count Dooku.
But honestly, at what cost? It just feels like it would be a lot simpler if she just let Tech do his thing. Sid never really learns to appreciate Tech for what he can do and instead constantly bullies him no matter how helpful he ends up being. It's really frustrating to watch, so I appreciate that in season 2 they brought in a character to directly contrast this ableist looking lizard face having dumb bitch.
Hey now. Got a name, Brown Eyes?
Tech. However, the phenotypic eye color for all clones is brown. Iris pigmentation was not affected.
Fee also starts off thinking that Tech just wants to lecture everyone for the sake of hearing himself talk.
It is a manifold regulator, and a broken one at that.
Thanks, Clone Obvious.
But his pure animal magnetism I mean, his good nature and moral fiber are all too compelling for her to be put off by a guy who just lacks social competence. And thank goodness the writers were able to write Tech in a way that was endearing instead of offensive or annoying. Being peculiar in a social setting is perhaps the most ubiquitous autistic experience.
Tech, what was the war like?
It was a primary mission objective, comprised of battles on various fronts.
But what was it like?
I just told you.
We've got a problem.
Not really. We're more deviant than we are defective.
Not that.
Social competence demands having contextual sensitivity and requires more than just knowing social rules, and this is something that people with autism often struggle with. The accuracy of Tech's depiction is rooted in writing his social challenges as dignified and relatable as possible, and not just manufacturing as much cringe as they possibly could. He's not infantilized or completely dysfunctional, and even though I myself am not specifically autistic, I feel joy when I see Tech being autistically awkward because he reminds me of people I love. And this makes me think that the team who wrote all of this was thinking about someone they knew and they loved, because there is nothing but love in this depiction. No mockery or patronizing tones at all. And I don't know if they knew this or not, but their depiction very accurately shows off a crucial feature of the autistic brain that contributes to every social hiccup they encounter. One of the key differences between the neurotypical and those with autism is their proficiency in receptive communication. Receptive communication refers to the ability to understand verbal language, facial expression, body language, and other nonverbal cues.
Aren't you, forgetting something?
Huh? You said you'd skip this step.
I could.
Right.
If I had some incentive. Of the financial variety.
I think he means credits.
Is that sufficient incentive?
Bruh. Pleasure doing business with you.
We're getting the hang of this civilian thing.
Autistic individuals just aren't receiving all the nonverbal messages that neurotypicals have such an easy time decoding. Combine this with context blindness and you get someone who not only has trouble determining what information to relay, but also predicting how that information might affect others. Many autistic people can be labeled insensitive or blunt because of this, and Tech has his fair share of those moments.
Given the fact that the crew was most likely eaten by the creature, I doubt it is currently hungry.
It ain't the crew?
How is that helping, Tech?
Access the lab vial.
What's wrong?
He doesn't trust us.
Well, seeing how all clones were given an order to execute the Jedi, he has good reason to be cautious.
In The Crossing, we see how Tech's poor aptitude and receptive communication affects his relationship with Omega. For my full analysis on that episode, check the link in the description after you finished here. Even Omega and her unconditional love can't help but feel frustrated when she just doesn't understand why Tech doesn't understand how she feels and what she needs from him. And because he misses much of this kind of communication, he doesn't have a lot of data when it comes to predicting the way people will respond to, say, being told something along the lines of,
Besides, it is most unlikely that the Marauder will be recovered.
What? Don't say that. We have to get it back.
We can always acquire another ship. It is merely a mode of transportation.
he's not technically wrong, but like, look at Omega. Clearly this is not the right thing to be saying. Tech is slow to realize that though what he said is true, it may not always be helpful.
What is your issue?
But that's tricky when he just doesn't notice things like Omega's distressed tone of voice when Tech tells her that Echo has shut off his comm.
Especially since he disabled his communication device.
What? Why?
I assume he's on a sensitive mission.
Another moment that comes to mind is when Echo is uncomfortable when he, Tech, and Omega discuss how they're going to essentially capitalize on the misfortune of those enslaved by the Zygarians.
They don't have a choice. They're captives, treated like property.
That doesn't seem right.
It's not. We are going to stop it from happening to that kid.
As well as earn a decent amount of credits once the job is complete.
Yeah, that too.
It's like trying to study for a test, but the study guide is written in a foreign language. This episode also shows Tech battling with another aspect of autism maybe some of you don't know about.
Alexithymia
is a term to describe problems with feeling emotions. In Greek, it loosely translates to no words for emotion.
I am not sure how I should care about change. It is a fundamental part of life.
Echo left. Why doesn't that bother you?
1 in 5 autistic people have
Alexithymia.
People who have
Alexithymia
may have trouble identifying, understanding, and describing emotions. They may also struggle to show or feel emotions that are seen as socially appropriate.
We're more than that. We're a family. Aren't we?
Well, yes. Yes, of course we are.
Then why don't you act like it?
This may also explain why Tech doesn't have typical reactions to things like peril or danger.
If I am incorrect, we will instantly be sucked out and perish. I am seldom wrong.
His responses don't reflect the seriousness of the situation at times, perhaps because of context blindness, but I think his slowness to recognize his own feelings also comes into play.
And where's Omega?
Found her.
I do not see Rekka, but Omega is hanging from a maintenance tower in
The
the sky.
Skyway.
Hanging?
For now, I suggest you hurry.
He's awake!
Oh, you made it.
The signal's too weak to establish a direct connection trace.
Omega.
Need a relay of your position. Try to create a power surge. Can you find a paddle nearby?
Other than not being able to steer or control where we land, I would say this is going well. Ah, well those weren't there when we landed.
Why is Omega hanging off the ship?
It is an unscheduled study break.
Tech also communicates in very direct and expository ways, often dictating to others what his thoughts are rather than how he feels, probably because he knows feelings are in there somewhere, but they are a lot harder to locate and describe.
Mako appears to be using his power and means as leverage over his workers. It is a similar tactic used by the Empire, although this operation is on a smaller scale.
Let it go, Rekka. Crosshair has always been severe and unyielding. It is his nature. You cannot change that. He cannot change that.
And this may be reaching, but I feel it in my soul. There are times when Tech narrates observations that usually would be things that others would simply observe and then react emotionally to, like a shift in vocal tone or expression. But Tech just recites what's going on.
You actually did it.
Well, of course I did.
Don't forget how good I've been at keeping secrets.
I believe she's threatening us.
You're quick.
And I theorize it may be because he's helping his brain process to some extent what he is feeling.
That is concerning.
And he states these things as fact, rather than change his expression or body language to communicate those things.
We are getting the hang of this.
Yes, your dangerous and uncontrolled maneuvering is as confusing to them as it is to us. The rampaging adolescent rancor is not the distraction I was anticipating.
That's their problem.
Think about how uncanny it feels when we actually get to see Tech emote in a way that is typical.
Offense is the best.
It could be that other than these few moments, Tech has found other ways to process how he feels about what is happening around him. Autistic people do adapt to their lives even though their brains function differently from what most people are used to. Our autistic loved ones just need more time developing certain skills that are more natural to neurotypical people.
I never thought of it like that.
Another reason it might take longer for autistic people to bolster their social aptitude is because the autistic brain has a very unique feature that simultaneously contributes to the savant nature of many on the spectrum
My exceptional mind.
and to the feeling that they're just on a completely different planet from the rest of us. Who cares about social constructs when there are hyperfixations to pursue? Many of you may be familiar with the term hyperfixation, which is commonly used to describe the extreme focus neurodivergent individuals can afford to subjects they have an intense interest for. But I discovered that this mode of intense focus happens because of how the autistic brain is structured. From the research that I found, it suggests that there are two different types of brains. There are polytropic brains and monotropic brains. Monotropism in autism is often linked to sensory processing differences and a preference for structured information processing. Their intense focus can usually be explained by a desire for predictability and familiarity.
This is not a standard military operation, and seeing as how we have never been tasked with rescuing a child from slave traders before, there is no data I can compare it to.
You're gonna be my security crew.
We will require a more detailed briefing than that.
No time. The shuttle's waiting.
Maybe it'll be fun.
Works for me.
In people with autism, autistic inertia is more than just having trouble with executive dysfunction. It's about having a hard time changing how your mind works. Starting, stopping, or switching focus can feel impossible.
On our way. Dick, let's go.
Not yet. We have not finished transferring all of the data.
My favorite thing about discovering monotropism and its associated autistic inertia is that the writers somehow, magically, ironically, had the idea to give Tech a signature maneuver which physically illustrates the exact opposite of autistic inertia. Weird coincidence or incredible narrative irony, you decide. Tech's expression of monotropism is primarily seen in his datapad usage. Clearly, he always has something else that is taking his attention.
The attempt on my life has left me scarred.
Quick side note, I also think his datapad is a form of stimming. Notice when he doesn't have it in the jail cell here on Camino, he resorts to a more common form of stimming, the leg jiggle. A few times his hyperfixation interferes with other priorities, as hyperfixations tend to do.
Ship got hit hard when we fled Seleucami. Several systems have been glitching ever since. Repairs would go faster if I had some help.
As soon as I finish building this scanner, testing the functionality of our inhibitor chips takes precedence.
I thought you said they were defective.
A theory this device will be able to prove. Besides, the ship-wide diagnostic report indicated no critical systems were compromised.
I feel like Echo and Hunter get the most frustrated with Tech's monotropism and how it may skew his priorities.
Getting thrown out of hyperspace. I'd say that's pretty critical, Tech.
It's not affecting life support. We're fine.
Are you kidding me?
But Wrecker can be frustrated with it too.
Our priority is scrambling the ship's signature key.
Your priority.
When Tech says something is fascinating,
Fascinating. It is fascinating.
that's an indicator to me that his hyperfixation has caught itself a new subject.
Now, if I can only get this thing working.
Oh, I can handle that.
Monotropic processing also explains the literal mindedness that autistic people are notorious for. The monotropic mind tends to expect one thing to flow from another more directly. Episode 4 of Season 2 highlights Tech's monotropism in the most explicit way. He goes from never having raced in his life to winning his very first race. I credit Tech's monotropism with his success in the riot racing because it gave him the ability to distill the race down to its most literal form. That being, if fast, then win!
I need more speed.
All of Tech's technique,
They were slowing me down.
comes down to min-maxing so that he is as fast as possible. It's the most literal interpretation of a race.
That works. I now have increased speed and maneuverability.
You're a strike, but you're still in last place.
And since he has that focus, he isn't bothered by the other parts of the race that distract from what makes a true winner. The person who crosses the finish line in the shortest amount of time. So there you have it. Tech is a beautiful example of autistic representation in media. I have no idea if any research was done on autism autism when this series was developed, but certainly someone wrote using a very personal template. And that's why I think he feels so real. Good characters in writing always come from real people and real experiences. His literal story is something that no one on this planet has ever experienced. And yet, this attention to his characteristics is what made him so relatable.
Execute a sharp swing back to port with 0 thruster pull.
The tick turn? Really?
Now that is not what it is called, but I rather like it.
Well, don't go running off with any pirates or smugglers while you're gone.
Yes, this mission should not involve either.
I'm not at all being dramatic when I say I mourn his loss.
I understand your hesitation. We have not always agreed with Crosshair, but he is still our brother. We do not leave our own behind.
If there's a chance to get him back, we have to take it.
Definitely.
Did they teach you Plan 72?
Mm-hmm. Tech had me memorize all the plans.
Of course he did.
I mourn seeing someone who reminds me of how wonderful the differences of our minds can be, and that relationships can be forged even though we have those differences. So thank you, Ted, and all the people that brought you to life. You'll forever live in the hearts of those who felt seen by you.
We're more than that. We're a family. Aren't we?
Well, yes. Yes, of course we are.